Welcome back, GRD 121, to part 2 of ps3 turkey masks, or you could just call it turkeys, but we're working with turkeys in this exercise, and we're working in Photopea, and so far we just made a cartoon turkey. We used the magic wand, we got rid of the white background, and we put a drop shadow, and then we separated the drop shadow from being a layer effect to actually being a separate layer, and we just kind of edited it and we transformed it and adjusted the size of it so it looked a little more realistic as a shadow. Now, right now, I'm just going to turn off Turkey Cartoon and turn off Turkey Cartoon Shadow, and I'm going to work on Turkey Real right now. And it's a little on the bigger side, and actually, I just grabbed it to move it. I should undo what I just did. Make sure that you're on Turkey Real. Even though I have the visibility off, it appear to let me grab it. So when you're on that, so make sure you're on the layer that you want and you target the layer you want. I think the last video I made a big deal about that, and of course the first thing I did is started grabbing hidden layer. All right, so I'm on Turkey Real, and I'll zoom out just a little, and I'll scale it down just a little bit, not as little as I want the turkey, but just enough so it's away from the edges. And I'll hit enter. Every time you scale, you should hit enter, and then I'll zoom in just a little bit so I could kind of work around here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to select the turkey, and sometimes you could select the background because it's all green, and sometimes your quick selection tool might work on that. I'm not even sure, and I don't find it as easy to work with as it is in Photoshop, so I'll say that. And I'll go to the quick selection tool. Now remember, the quick selection tool is going to be like a brush, and a lot of times it's really hard to see where your brush is. I have it, it's real small in the middle of the turkey. I don't even know if you can see where it is right now. It's like in the middle of the turkey's back, and it's really tiny. But let me just make the brush bigger by using my brackets. I'm going to use my right brackets. You might start to see it now. There's this little circle in the middle. It's really hard to see. I just wish that the selections that they showed for those things were easier to see. Now, with this thing, you can actually just kind of brush, just kind of click in here. You don't even have to brush, but you could kind of click in here, and it should select everything kind of neighboring. Now, it won't be perfect. It won't get everything. Now, you could select in the middle or select outside. I'm just curious. I didn't do this last time, so of course I'm trying something different. But if you click on the outside, it gets a lot of the green. Actually, that works a lot better, to be honest. It doesn't get his foot, just like the other one. I guess it doesn't look a whole lot different. It's still missing, well, it looks okay. It's kind of doing what the magic wand did, except it has a little bit of range. So, well, actually, let's see if we can add up here. Now I'm going to click up here, too. And I'll undo that because it looks like the entire screen is selected now. So I'm just going to undo that. So I'll do this part. And now you could just hit delete. But obviously if you hit delete, then if parts are gone, then parts are gone and you can't get them back. So I'm going to undo that. I'm not going to delete like I did with the magic wand. What I'm going to do is create a mask, a layer mask. Now they call it a raster mask. Now you could do it down here. I think there's an area down here. I'd rather just do it from the layer so you know where to get it. It's raster mask. And they have some options here called reveal selection, hide selection. Now, we selected the background. Now, you could try selecting the turkey. That's what I did the first time. I used the turkey. And then you'd reveal selection. Now, since I selected the background, I want to hide the selection. And the way a mask works is it uses black pixels to hide and white pixels to reveal. So I'm going to hide selection. And there it is. I have a lot of this stuff kind of hidden already. Now, what I want to point out here, I'm not sure how this, okay, here's what it looks like. This is what I just option clicked or alt clicked on the mask, and this is what it looks like. That's what a mask does. Black hides from the layer and white reveals. So everything in the white you can see, everything in the black you can't. And we're going to add to the black to hide more. So I'm going to option click on this again. Now I'm just looking at that. Now what you actually do with the mask is, for one thing, make sure that you're on the mask. Because you could go here and click on the image. So if you wanted to adjust the levels or anything like that, you can do that on the image, but I don't right now. I want to click on the mask. And there's also a little chain link in between them, meaning they're linked. So if you move one, you move the other, and that's good because that's the whole point. We want them to stay together. Now, if you stay on the mask with that little dotted line around it, that's what you want to do. You're going to paint with the paintbrush. You're not going to use any special tool. You can use a paintbrush. So I'm going to go over here and click on the paintbrush now. Now, again, I have to look and see how big my brush is. I'm going to make my brush bigger by using the brackets. So I'll make it as big as like his head almost. I know it's really hard to see. I have it right there in the black so you can kind of see it. Now, here's the thing. The thing is, down here at the very bottom of your toolbox, you have the foreground color, which is white, and you have the background color, which is black. And there's a little tiny arrow thing there that you could click on. And actually, let me click on D. Oh, actually, you should click on D because it doesn't look like it's white right now. It didn't look like it looked kind of gray, so I'm glad I did that. So I clicked on D. Now this is really tiny down here. D is default. That'll make white foreground, black background. That means if I paint it right now, when you paint with your brush, you paint with the foreground color by default. So you paint with white. So if I paint it with white here, it's not going to do anything. If I paint it white over here, it's going to put stuff back, which I don't want. So I'll just undo, Control Z or Command Z. Now I want to hide all this green stuff here, so I'm just going to paint it away by painting with black. Now again, these little tools down here in the toolbox, D is default, so make sure it's white and black. And then if there's a little double arrow thing, and it's really hard to see, but if you click on the double arrow, you can also use your X key. You can see if I hover over it, it says X. That means you could use your X on your keyboard and swap these things back and forth. I'm hitting my X key right now, and they're going back and forth. So that means white brings it back, black hides stuff. So right now I have black as the foreground, white as the background. And I'm going to just go here and just paint right over this. Now I have a kind of a hard brush, and that's okay. And I'm just getting rid of stuff. And I'm getting rid of, I think there's some stuff over there. It's kind of hard to see where stuff is. If you don't know where stuff is, turn off snowfield. Look at that. Now it's a lot easier to see where stuff is without looking at the snowfield. Now I'm not sure what's happening because there's kind of like white feathers there, so I want to be careful, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And you don't always want a white background because you want to see what it looks like in front of this. And again, if I'm going around feathers, I probably don't want a hard brush. I probably want to go into my brushes up here, and where it says hardness, if it's 100%, I want to turn it down. Now, there is a shortcut to adjust your hardness, but it's really hard to see, so I like to use the slider for hardness. But you can just use your brackets, your square brackets or your curly braces on your keyboard next to the P to adjust the size as you're working. But if you want to adjust the hardness or softness, go over here. Now, obviously, the softer it is, the softer edge. And that way, if you're painting around here, you know, feathers, you want a soft edge. So I'm just clicking around here, and it doesn't have to be perfect. I just don't want any green stuff showing. So I'm just going around the feathers right here, and I'm adding to the mask. Meaning what I'm painting right now is painting black, and it's hiding stuff. So I'm going to go around here. It might have taken away some of the feathers. That's okay. We don't have to be perfect around it right now. Just for now at least here I can see things a little bit better. Now just be careful. You have the soft edges. Now you can also turn down the opacity. If you ever have an issue and you're like, this isn't going away, make sure your opacity is at 100. Now, if you're ever doing like hair or something like that, that may be a reason to turn down the opacity. And even doing like feathers may be a reason, but I'm not that worried about it. Sometimes if you want it softer, you could just make your brush like really big. And then if you just bump it against the edge, you'll get that kind of softer edge around there that'll make things kind of fade out a little bit more, especially if it's, you know, if it's feathers. You don't want hard edges. Now, I'll make it a little smaller here because some of this selection made it a little rough around the edge, or a little sharp, I guess I'll say. And if you screw it up, the nice thing is you can hit your X key, and I could go here and like bring some stuff back. You see what I'm doing? I'm bringing back some feathers here. I'm painting with white now. Painting with white as my foreground color, and I'm putting some feathers. And then you might say, well, nah, that doesn't look good. But if you put on the snowfield, it might look good. Sometimes you might want to go back and reveal some stuff just to see what you're doing. Now, I don't want to reveal any green, but I'm just adding a little bit around here just to let some of those feathers show up again. And again, if some of the green shows up, just hit X and go in and get rid of it. That's the nice thing about a mask. It's not permanent. And I'll hold my space bar and kind of move around here and see how some of this stuff looks over here. And it looks a little harder edge there, but you know what? That's okay. Here's some stuff here that looks like it went away, so I'm going to make sure I'll hit X, so I'll make sure I'll paint white in case it took some out. Look, it took some out of the feathers. So you could sometimes go in there and just add a little bit. Now put a little green back there. I don't know if it's going to matter. You know, again, we could spend a lot of time being really careful about this, and I'll take some away. You know, you can make your brush real small and do all kinds of little edits and stuff. Now, the only thing down here is it looks like it took away some of this. Now, if you're ever like, wow, what did it take away? You can always right-click on the raster mask and disable it. And then enable it and be like, wait, what happened? And I'm right-clicking here, and don't delete it, just disable it. And it looks like it took away some of this. It's hiding that. So I'm just going to go and reveal some of that stuff. Now again, don't delete it, just enable it. And it looks like that was here. So I'm going to do X, and I'm just going to paint with white. And I'm just going to put back his foot just so I can see it. And I'll just put back some of this here. Just a little bit. And then I'll zoom in. I'll make my brush a little smaller. Now it's still soft. So you might want to go back and harden it a little bit, meaning make the edge a little harder. Not all the way. You probably rarely want it 100%. And then I'll make my brush a little smaller. Now, one thing I will point out, and if you ever need to close this, and just click on the bar here if it doesn't close. And I'll make the brush smaller again. If you ever need to do a straight line, just click once. Now, I'm in the wrong color. I should do X and make sure it's black. Because if I want to cover up this green, I want it painting black. So I want the foreground down here being black. So I'm going to click here. Now, if you ever do a straight line, you could click once, hold your Shift key, and then go down here, and it'll do like a straight line kind of paint. Sometimes that's helpful if you ever have to silhouette something that has a lot of straight lines. So I'll use that method. I'll go down here and kind of do these. I'm holding Shift and going down here. Now, I'll go down here. Now, we could make him look like he's kind of in the snow. So I'll just make my brush a little bit bigger here. And this is where you could even turn down the opacity, but you have to remember that you did it so you can put it back. But if you want to put down the hardness and make it real soft, and then even take down the opacity here, that way it won't be as strong when you first do it. And you can kind of click and do it a couple times, and then it's a little subtler way to make it look like it's disappearing. Even over here, I'll try to go in here a little bit, because we'll make him look like his feet are kind of disappearing in the snow. Now I'll go a little smaller in here, and again, just want to get rid of the green and stuff, so I'll go real small to get in between his toes. And the nice thing about the opacity is you can kind of go over it a couple times. It's not 100% the first time. And I messed it up a little, but that's okay because no one's going to be looking at his feet too much. I just want to get some of the green out of there, and I think that's okay. Wherever we put him, I don't think you're going to notice that. And I don't think we had more of his foot there, so I think that's okay. And again, there's some rough edges around here, but we're going to put a shadow on him again. The only other thing I might want to check, and I'll zoom in again, is check around his head. Make sure that looks okay. Make sure it looks like I lost some stuff here, like around his neck. So I'll make the brush a little bit bigger, and I'll make sure I paint with white, and I'll just hit my X, so white's at the top, and just kind of click here and bring some things back around his head, because it like took away part of his head. Not that you'd notice it that much, but I'll just bring in part of his head. So I think that looks okay. That's not too bad. So that method seemed to work okay. It wasn't too bad. And I'll zoom out enough, and now I want that turkey smaller, because if I happen to put on the other turkeys, I mean, it looks gigantic. So I don't want the turkey, this particular turkey, that big. So I'm going to scale him down. So I'll use my move tool, because I'm done with my layer mask right now, I think. And I'm going to make it smaller. And that's a pretty good sized turkey. I think that's like I had in the sample. I had them even smaller than the other one. So that looks okay. And remember, whenever you scale, hit enter. And I should probably do a save. Remember, I'm not working on Google Drive, so I'm trying to do it showing that you can do this without Google Drive. It's not as safe, obviously, but I'm trying it out. So I'm going to put a drop shadow on them. And it doesn't matter if you're on the mask or the regular layer to put the drop shadow on. I'm going to do it the same way. I'm going to go to Layer, Layer Style, and I'll go to Drop Shadow. I was going to say I could copy the Drop Shadow from the other one, but I changed it into a layer, so I can't do that anymore. So I'm going to go to Drop Shadow and move this away. And let's see, I think last time I had it like that. I'll make the distance a little bigger. What's happening with this thing? Oh, it's there. Looks like it needs a little more on the sides, a little more blur. Now, it's not really where I want it yet. That's okay up there. I'm just going to hit OK. So there's this drop shadow. Remember, you could turn it on and off. And what I'm going to do is separate it then, because I want to scale the drop shadow just like I did with the other one. And maybe I'll put on the other turkey just so I could kind of look at it and compare. And before I do anything, let's see, do I want to make it any darker? No, it's okay. I think what I have, let's see what the opacity is. I think that's okay. You could always make it less. So again, you'd probably be better off making it darker, because you could always turn down the layer opacity. Now, what I'm going to do is separate it now. So I'm going to go to Layer, Layer Style, and Create Layers. And it'll make a separate layer for the drop shadow. Now, here's the thing, and I'm going to have to undo this. look at what happened. It's making a box. So I'm going to undo that. And you might say, well, now what? What are you supposed to do now? Well, what I could do now, if I knew I was going to make a separate shadow, I can actually apply the mask, not delete the mask. If I deleted the mask, it would go back the way it was with the green background. But if I actually apply it, it'll delete the mask and apply the changes and delete all the changes. So you have to be okay with what you did right now. You know, if you really weren't sure, I guess you could duplicate it or something and make a copy or something. But again, they're turkeys, so you know this isn't that big of a deal here. But if you apply the mask, what it does is it gets rid of the mask and it deletes everything that you had hidden. So it makes it permanent. So the mask is great to work with because it's flexible, but you can make it permanent. And if that's your intent, then that's fine. And now if you had to go back and someone yelled at you and said you lost his part of his beak, you know, I guess you'd have to go back. So, you know, but this isn't a professional job right now. Now what you can do is, because we have this drop shadow, it'll be a regular drop shadow. Now you could go to layer, layer style. You could go to create layers and you could do that. There's his turkey drop shadow, the real turkey drop shadow. Make sure you select it and target it. And then I'll do the same thing I did with the other one. I'll squash it a little, squash it down so it looks like it's like the other one, and then I'll do the edit, transform, distort, and that'll allow me to grab the corners and just kind of like move them over here a little bit to kind of like skew it a little bit, just a little bit. You can squash it down more. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can even move the whole thing underneath him a little bit more, and then you could also turn down the opacity if you had to. Here's the opacity of that layer. It used the same opacity that you put in, but you can change it. So if you need to make it, you know, lighter or something, you can go back and make it lighter. That actually looks okay. So I think the turkeys look okay. They look pretty good here, I think. As far as what I'm doing, I think they look fine. Now, what you can also do, and we'll do this now, is if you select the turkey cartoon and his shadow and you want them to move together, because you don't want them moving separate, what you can do, can you right click? I don't know if they let you right click and do this. They don't have all the right click options. That's why I'm telling you to go to the layer palette to do this. But anyway, so select both the turkey cartoon and the turkey cartoon shadow, those two layers here, and go to layer and then just group the layers. And it'll make a layer called folder 1 and just call it turkey cartoon or something like that. And then it'll have the turkey, I spelled turkey wrong, but it's turkey cartoon and shadow are in there. And that way they'll move together. So you can move the whole thing around as one thing. And then you could do the same thing with turkey real. Select that layer, hold shift, and click on that layer. And then go layer, group layers. And then just rename it so it doesn't say folder 1. Just call it turkey real. And that's it. And I'll change I don't want people to think I can't spell turkey, so I'll put a U back in. Okay, so now I have these on their own separate layers. They work together. Oh wait, I'm still on that one. And here's the turkey real layer. So I can move them where I want it to be. And one other thing I'll do two things before we do some text, and then we'll finish up with part 3. Now, I'll save this. What I'm working on here, I'll save it. Now, one last thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to make a new layer above turkey cartoon. New layer, go down here, make new layer. And I'll do this kind of quick. I won't measure off guides and stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to I'll do this by eye. I'll measure in almost like a 1/4 inch sort of. I'm starting right here and I'm just drawing in a box with my rectangular marquee. I'm coming in maybe, it looks like maybe a 1/4 inch from each side. I'm just kind of eyeing it up. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. You could bring in guides. Like you could go in here and measure it. And let's see, it's hard to see these. There's actually I can see the numbers here. You could do that. I mean, I guess I'll do that since I started doing these guides. You're dragging them in from the rulers. And even though I'm just kind of still almost doing it by eye, I just want an even amount kind of in from all sides. So you can use guides. That looks okay. That'll help you draw your thing, but it's not a big deal. So I'm going to draw a marquee. A marquee is just a selection. Now, I don't want to select the inside. I want to select inverse. And I did that on another exercise. We selected everything but, and we want to do that again. Select inverse. And now you can see it's selecting this little border here. And we're going to fill that with white. And again, you have to be on a new layer, so make sure you made a new layer. And I'm going to fill it. And you can do edit, fill. Now you could use foreground color, which would be white, or you could just choose white. That'll work too. And then I'll fill that with white. Now, this is important. Make sure you do this, and even in Photoshop, make sure you do this. Make sure you do select, deselect, because if you try to blur it with the selection, it won't blur correctly. So I'm going to deselect it. And you could even name this layer Vignette. You'll know how to spell it, Vignette. It's a vignette, that's soft-edged border on it. Now, it's not soft-edged right now, and if you want to hide your guides, you could go to View, Show, and uncheck Guides. If you don't want to see your guides anymore, you could turn them off because that may affect the way it looks. Now, what you want to do is you want to be on this vignette, or layer 1, whatever it's called, and go to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. And you'll get a little slider, and you just want to increase it. Now, I'm not sure how much it'll be. Maybe something like around 20. Probably looks pretty good. Probably not much more than that. Maybe 25 at the most. And it has a preview on, so obviously you could adjust it. Now, once you do this, it's permanent. So the Gaussian blur is permanent. This isn't a, you can always do it as some kind of smart layer or something, but we're doing it permanent. So if you didn't like it, you just have to do it again. And I'll leave it on 25. Maybe you could do it 22, something like that, but that looks okay. And I'll do that. And one other thing I'm going to do before I take a break is I'm going to go on Snowfield, and I'm going to add a layer again. And I'm just going to call it color. I'll call it Colorize. How about we call it Colorize? Now, we're not going to do a whole lot here, but I'm going to call it Colorize. Now, there's nothing on that layer. It's transparent, has a little checkerboard. I'm going to fill it with a beigey color. So I'm going to go Edit, Fill, except it won't give me options, foreground, background, custom, or whatever. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to fill this, except instead of choosing from foreground, background, we're going to use custom. And if you go over here, you can pick a color. Now, I'm going to pick a color from the turkey. I'll just pick a brown color. And you could go a little kind of less saturated over here a little bit. And then I'll hit OK. So it's going to fill with that color. It's going to fill the whole layer with that color. And you might say, what the hell is that? What are you doing? Well, what I can do is on this layer, if I go to normal, and I change normal, and I scroll all the way down to the bottom, and I make it color, it will colorize the layer. And it gives that kind of, they call it sepia tone, even though this isn't really sepia, it's kind of a brown tone. Now, I don't want it that brown. I just wanted to put a little tint on it. So the nice thing about doing Colorize is it lets all the highlights come through. If you just put a color there and turn down the opacity, it wouldn't do the same thing. For example, if I just had it on normal, sometimes people do this and they go, oh, I'm going to colorize it, and they turn the opacity down and they do this, and it doesn't look quite the same because you lose some of the highlights. It's like putting sunglasses on. It kind of, cuts down on it a little bit. So what I want to do is make sure that's on color, which is like Colorize, and then you can still turn down the opacity so it's not colorizing as much. So I'll just turn it down a little, so I let a little color through. I don't want it completely, I want a little color coming through so the sky looks a little blue, but not too much, so it still has kind of a warmer feel. That's kind of what I want, kind of a warmer feel. And, there's before, after. So just a little bit. That's all I want there. And that's a cool thing to do with photos and stuff, to know how to do that. So if you ever want to colorize photos, you can use that method. It's real easy to use using a vignette and a Colorize. You come up with some really nice effects with some older photos and things like that. So, and notice I'm doing it only above Snowfield. It's not colorizing my cartoon turkey or my live turkey. I'll leave Colorize there. I have my vignette. Everything looks good. I'll do File, Save. And even what I'll do now, because I'm going to take a break and we'll just do some text and finish this up in part 3. What I'll do, because I'm not working in Google Drive, is I'll just go in my downloads right now and get rid of this thing. And it's in my garbage. Now, I won't empty my trash, but this is my turkey PSD. I'm just going to drag it into my trash. However you delete it, that's how I do it on Mac. I just drag it to the trash. I could right click and say move to trash. So I can do that. But anyway, that way I'll download this and it'll be the only one there in my downloads. So I'm going to download it again by going File, Save as PSD. And there it goes. So now I have a saved version that's downloaded to my computer if I need it. Now I'll keep this going because if I don't crash, I just have, it's kind of like a backup. Look at it that way. All right, so we're going to come back with part 3 and we're going to just do some text and we're going to submit our file.